Hello everybody, this is Reza Durrani, Microsoft Business Applications MVP. In this video, I will be walking you through the process of deploying the COVID-19 tracking application on a new tenant or on your existing tenant. So in this solution, you will get a zip file. So the first step is to unzip the zip file. And once you do that, within the solution, you will find three solutions. One is the application, which is the Power App. The other one is a Power Automate to deploy the SharePoint lists that support this application. And the third one is another Power Automate flow, which reads data from the web service, which has all the information for tracking the coronavirus and uploads all that information that it gets into the SharePoint lists that we have created. So in order to start working on this application, the first thing is you need to define a location in SharePoint where you would like to deploy your assets. Now, if you've already used the crisis communication application, you would have created a SharePoint site for that specific purpose. You can deploy the same artifacts there. In this scenario, I am using a SharePoint site, which is my root site in Office 365, and all the users in my tenant have access on this site, so I'm going to deploy all my artifacts here. Okay, so to begin with, we are going to go to Power Automate. So I'm going to go to powerautomate.com, and right here you can go to My Flows and import. So this is step number one. Go to upload, and right here you will upload the COVID tracking deploy SP lists solution file. And once you do this, this should go ahead and install the flow in your environment. Now once it does that, it's going to give a name to the flow, which is the default name, and it will ask you to have a connection created for SharePoint. Now I already have a connection created, so I'm going to leverage that. If you did not have one, you can go ahead and create a new connection and connect to SharePoint. Once you do this, you can click import. Now while this is importing, please note that this flow uses is making a call out to a web service. I have built this application keeping licensing in mind. This flow will run under the context of one account, which would be your main account or your service account, which would need a premium license because we're going to use the HTTP action, which is a premium action and flow to fetch the data. But once we get the data using this one account, we can push this data to the SharePoint list, which is exactly what this flow does. Not this flow, the other flow that we're going to import. And in that scenario, because we are reading the data from a SharePoint list and SharePoint is a standard connector, we do not need any additional licensing. So once you import this flow, if you go back to My Flows and refresh your browser, you should see the COVID tracking deploy SP list flow. Just go ahead and edit this flow first. And right here in the initial variable, you need to put the URL of your SharePoint site. Now in my scenario, I want to deploy all the artifacts on the root site. So all I need to do is just put the URL of the root site right here. Click Save. And once I'm done with this, I'm going to go ahead and test this flow or run this flow. Click on Test. And it's making sure that all the connections are good. Once it does that, okay, it says location services must be enabled. All right, let's go ahead and just run this flow. Sorry, just going to go back. Let's try and run this flow again. Let's just allow this. Click Run. This should go ahead and deploy all the artifacts. Okay, and while this flow is running, if I go back to my SharePoint site and go to Site Contents, you will notice that all the three lists that the solution leverages are deployed right here. And this flow, if I refresh this, should have completed by now. So this is just a one-time run just to deploy the lists that support this solution. The next step, I'm going to go back to flows, go back to import. And this time we're going to import the second flow, which is the main data flow that fetches data from the web service and then uploads all that information into the backend lists that have been created to support this application. Now, once you import this flow, again, you need to ensure that you have a SharePoint connection. And once you do that, just click on import, and this will go ahead and import the data flow as well. This flow is the flow that basically runs on a schedule to fetch data from the web service and add all that information into the SharePoint lists, which the Power App leverages. Okay, so now all packages are successfully imported. Let's go back and refresh this, and we should see the data flow. Now, as you can see, the trigger for this flow is to run on a schedule. Now, depending upon how frequently you want the data to be available to your users, right now it's running once a day. Maybe you can run this every hour, every 2 hours, every 3 hours to keep the data consistent in the backend data set, so that when users leverage your app is showcasing almost real-time data. So in my case right now, the default is once a day. So this will just run once a day. You can change the schedule. Now, once you import this flow, you need to change certain things. The main things being is the connection to SharePoint. So if you open the first scope, there is a SharePoint connection right here. And as you can see, this is pointing to the site from which this solution was imported. So what you need to do is you need to pick your SharePoint site where you've deployed the artifacts. Okay, and for the first case, you need to pick the history list. So there's a COVID tracking history list. Just pick this one for the set run number scope. And then there is a second SharePoint action. And again, you need to go ahead and pick the history list. So that's what you need to do in the first scope. Make sure you pick the correct list, which is the history list in the SharePoint site where you got the artifacts deployed. The next step is fetching the data, and this is that HTTP web service call that's a premium action, and this flow is going to be running under one user's account, so only that user would need that specific license. And this points out to that web service, an arcgis that fetches all the information or the latest information that's available for the coronavirus. Now, if you go to apply to each, there is a SharePoint action right here which creates items. So again, we need to change this to our site. And this time the list where the data is held is called COVID tracking data. So you need to pick the data list right here. And next, we need to also update the history list. So once again, I'm going to go ahead and pick the history list in my site. Okay. And that's what I need to do for scope number 2. So the first scope is it sets the next run number. The next thing, it fetches all the data. And the third part of the scope is to delete items from the main data list for previous runs. So once again, we're going to go ahead and pick the data list in this case. And when we are deleting the item as well, we are deleting it from the data list. So once again, we need to ensure that we've picked data. That's all what we need to do here. Going to go ahead and save this. Okay. That's all I had to do. Now if I head back, if I click on run, and if I hit run the flow, this should go ahead and trigger the run for my flow. Now what this is going to do is this is going to go ahead and add information number 1 in the history list first, that hey, this run has started. So here's the information. You can add additional columns in your view like status and run. So it's telling me that this one is currently running because my flow is running, and this is my first run, and this is the date and time the run started. And while this is running, if I head back to the data list, this should start uploading data from the web service into my data list. You can also add additional columns here in your view like region, latitude, longitude, how many confirmed cases, recovered cases, deaths, and what run number is this. So if I apply this, you should be able to see all that information also coming through, and all of this is coming through from that web service call, right? So when you schedule your flow, that will depend upon your schedule will decide how frequently your data is updated in the backend list, and the Power App is going to talk to this list. All right. So now that I've set up the flows, of course, my job is running. As you can see, if I refresh this, the status is still running. So I need to wait for this to complete at least once. I need one run in there. In the meanwhile, we're going to go to Power Apps. So we go to make.powerapps.com, and right here I'm going to go to apps. I'm going to go to import a canvas app, apps, import canvas app, go to upload, and this time we're going to upload the main app that's available as part of the solution package. And once you do that, this is going to go ahead and import the application in here. You can change the name if you want to. So if you can click here and change the name. Otherwise, if you're good with the existing name, just go ahead and import this app. So this should go ahead and import this application into your environment. All right, so the app has been imported. Now, if I go back to apps, here's my app called Coronavirus Tracker. Now, if you play this app, there are certain things that you need to first configure, so it's not going to work correctly. So I'm just trying to play this app right now, and it looks like it's just loading. Let's try and click on it once again and see if it loads. All right, so it's asking for specific connections. Let's say I click on allow. This should go ahead and fetch the data. It's going to probably error out because there are some connections that we need to change. And then finally it takes me to the home page, and as you can see, there's not much information here. So I'm going to close this for now, head back to my app, and let's edit this app. So there are some settings that we need to change. Okay, so this is going to take me to the edit mode of my application. All right, so the first thing we need to change is my data sources. So if I go back to data source right here, I have these 3 SharePoint connections right here. You need to remove all the 3 SharePoint connections because they are pointing to the SharePoint site from where this app was imported from. So you need to remove all the 3 and then go ahead and search for SharePoint. If you don't see a connection here, add a connection. Otherwise, pick an existing connection and then enter the URL of the SharePoint site and click on connect. This is for the SharePoint site where you've deployed the artifacts. My site's right here, so I'm going to pick this and I'm going to include the data, the tracking, and the videos SharePoint list, and I'm going to click on connect. Okay, so this is going to go ahead and add all the connection in here. Now in this application, if you notice, the Bing map requires a key. So if I play this app right now, and if I click here, this takes me to a link where I can go and acquire a Bing Maps key, either a basic key for my usage, and there are a lot of free runs that you can leverage, or you can go ahead and purchase an enterprise key. It's not that expensive. And once you have that key, you can go to app, and right here, there is a configuration option to put the Bing Maps key right here. Okay, so all you need to do is you need to put the Bing Maps key in this location. Okay, now once you do this, you need to, so I'm going to go ahead and add my Bing Maps key out here. Of course, I can't showcase my keys. I'm just going to take this out, plug my key in, and get my screen back in. All right, so I've plugged in my key. I'm going to right click here and just run on start again. So I'm just going to right click, run on start. My key is in. You should not see any errors. As you can see, I don't have any errors, but I don't see any data as well. The reason is because if I head back to my history list, you will notice that it is still running. That means it is still fetching data from that web service. So that flow is basically still running. We need to wait for this flow to complete, right? This flow is still running the first time. Now, if I go back into this flow just to see where this flow is right now, the flow is currently in a state where it is actually adding data from the web service. So we need to wait for that. And if I go back to site contents and if I reload this, you will notice that the COVID tracking data list is getting populated with data from that web service. So we just need to wait for that data to come in. But from a Power App perspective, all I need to do is delete those 3 SharePoint connections, re-add them, and go to app, and then just add my Bing Maps key in there. And that's all I have to do from a Power App perspective. And once I'm done with that, I can go to File, Save, and Publish. Okay, that's all I need to do, and my app is ready to use. So I've published my app. I'm going to close my browser window, or I'm going to close that tab, head back to Power Apps, and here is my Coronavirus Tracker application. I'm not going to play it right now because I'm going to wait for this app to run, or my flow to run, because my flow is still running. And while my flow is running, these two lists are leveraged by the flow, the history list and the tracking list. There is a third list called COVID tracking videos. Now what this list enables, or what this list contains is, if you remember, if I go back to my app, so if I play this app right now, okay, this app is loading data. It's still showing the Bing Maps key. That means I need to refresh my browser window. It's still cached. All right, I am in now. If I go to videos, you will notice it has no information in the videos section. And if I need to add information in this video section, what I need to do is I need to go to my videos list. And in this list, I'm going to add a couple of columns, YouTube URL and order. Click on apply. And what I need to do here is I just need to provide links to videos on YouTube, provide a title, and give it the order in which it needs to showcase on that screen on my app. Now I already have some data that I have pre-created, so I'm just going to copy that, go to quick edit, and just paste my data in here. That's all I'm going to do. So I have a few links to YouTube videos with basic titles and ordering defined, and you as an admin can add or remove videos right here. Now if I head back to my app, and if I just refresh my app, I should be able to, in fact, if you see, I'm even seeing the data now. That's probably because if I head back to my run history, the run is complete. I have all my data loaded, and now the app is ready to use, right? Here's my app in question. It has all the data based on the last run of my flow. It can even track my current location and tell me what's going on around me. If I go to videos now, all those videos that I added in the list for videos are showing up right here. I can play these videos right here inline. Of course, send emails or change the settings of my app. So that's how you go ahead and set up the coronavirus tracking application. Thank you so much for watching.